Today, we're talking about banks in Barbados and the process and requirements for opening accounts. Banks in Barbados are often shortlisted by non-residents of Canada, the UK, and elsewhere. And one of the major reasons for this is that Barbados has more than 40 double tax agreements in place offering tax advantages to certain client groups. So it shouldn't surprise you that Barbados banking clients are looking for more than the standard banking benefits that are offered elsewhere. They want tax efficiency and a bit more respectability. In today's video, we'll explore whether or not you should consider banking in Barbados, the types of banks in Barbados that non-residents and companies can access, and who benefits the most from opening accounts here. But before we get started, make sure you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you get alerted every time we post new non-resident banking opportunities. Now, to help you get started with banking in Barbados, we have a free non-resident banking starter guide. It's designed to help non-resident and foreigners open bank accounts in places like Barbados. So, don't forget to download your copy using the link in the description below. Now, to keep things short, here's what you need to know about Barbados from a banking perspective. Barbados was first occupied by the British in 1627. And it wasn't until 1966, a whole 339 years later, that it finally gained full independence. Now, during the 1970s, while the long arm of the City of London extended across the Caribbean, Barbados wasn't considered one of the crown jewels, much like Bahamas, Cayman, or BVI. Instead, Barbados struck out on its own, kind of like Beyonce, signing tax agreements that put the country at the center of free-flowing tax efficiency deals with major players like the US and, even the UK. But Barbados really started to make a name for itself in the 80s. In 1980, Barbados signed a double tax agreement with Canada, essentially encouraging Canadians and Canadian businesses to route their earnings through this small Caribbean nation. But in reality, the tax agreement turned Barbados into an unofficial part of the Canadian economy, becoming one of the most tax-efficient avenues for Canadian corporates to repatriate earnings back home. Today, Canadian corporates, entrepreneurs, rich families, and their trusts flock to Barbados to take advantage of the available benefits. As of 2019, nearly $40 billion was held in Barbados on behalf of Canadian corporations alone. Not too shabby for a tiny Caribbean island with only 300,000 people. Now, could losing the Queen impact banks in Barbados? While Canadian connections are strong in Barbados, the country is apparently cutting ties with one of its other sovereign relatives, the UK. In September 2020, Barbados announced that it was officially removing the Queen as its head of state, making Barbados the world's newest republic. Now, you may find some locals in the streets cheering, "Finally, down with the monarchy." But in reality, nothing is changing. Barbados will still have a prime minister, a Westminster-style parliament, and it's even staying within the Commonwealth. In other words, this is better explained as a change in branding than a shift that could impact economics, banking, or existing tax treaties. Now we come to Barbados' relationship with blacklists and watch lists. The biggest risk to Barbados, like other small banking jurisdictions, is the ongoing de-risking by international banks, correspondent bank relationships, or CBRs, and international regulators. For example, Barbados is currently on the FATF Grey List, was only recently removed from the EU Blacklist, and is considered by the US Department of State as a major money laundering concern for the proceeds of drug trafficking. So, needless to say, the banking sector, local regulators, and banks in Barbados are all on their best behavior right now and walking on eggshells to make sure that they get removed from existing watch lists and so they don't get added back onto the EU list of non-cooperative jurisdictions. Now that we have a full picture of Barbados as a banking hub, it's time to take a look at the banks in the country. Today, there are over 30 banks in Barbados. Many of them are medium-sized Caribbean banks, while others are international banks from first world countries. Canadian banks, not surprisingly, play a large role here, just like they do in other Caribbean island nations. But this could change given the desire of CIBC, RBC, and Scotiabank to reduce their presence in the region. All that being said, international banking in Barbados is primarily focused on corporate clients, representing about 85% of total assets. Now, with this in mind, most of the larger banks on the island simply operate as a tax-efficient booking center for their parent companies and non-resident clients. Personal banking, which represents around 10% of the international banking activity in Barbados, but the banks in Barbados that cater to foreigners, non-residents, and expats focus on investing and wealth management activities. So if you're interested in banking in Barbados, you should be in search of private bank accounts. Lastly, certain banks in Barbados have specific regional interests that could be of interest to certain groups. For example, some banks are more inclined to deal with North American and Latin American clients, while others are more familiar and comfortable with Russian and CIS clients. Other niches include international corporates, trusts, regional businesses, and more. And as always, be sure to consider all of the private banking and wealth management jurisdictions available to you before you rush to open an account. Okay, well, let's take a look at some of the benefits of using banks in Barbados. There are a few noteworthy advantages to opening bank accounts with banks in Barbados compared to other Caribbean nations. These range from strong tax treaties with international jurisdictions to low domestic tax rates for offshore companies. Now, with this in mind, here's a quick list of the key benefits non-residents look to capture when banking in Barbados. Access to large international banks, strong tax treaties with more than 40 countries, commitment to international regulatory standards, low tax rate for offshore companies of only 2.5%, low tax rate for captive insurance companies of 0%, low tax rate for Barbados offshore trusts of 0%, lax offshore trust requirements, no annual reporting, educated and English-speaking bankers, and educated and English-speaking professional service providers. So, what do you actually need to open an account in Barbados? Like banking anywhere, you'll need to pass each bank's onboarding and due diligence process. Now, while the exact requirements vary from bank to bank, you can assume that you'll need to provide certified documents for both yourself and your company, as well as much more if opening corporate accounts. But in addition to passing due diligence, bank selection is really important, and you want to make sure that you're opening with the best banks in Barbados. Again, with over 30 banks to choose from, not all of them accept non-residents and foreign companies, even if junior staffers say that they do. So, when opening accounts with banks in Barbados, make sure that you're applying at a bank that actually caters to your specific client profile. From there, the onboarding and due diligence process will differ depending on several factors, namely who you are, where your company's from, your business type, risk profile, and much more. All right, armed with all of that information, feel like you're prepared to open an account with banks in Barbados? If you need help finding the best banks in Barbados, want to know which banks will actually accept you, or just aren't sure where to turn, we can help. We explore everything that you need to know about international banking, account opening, and bank and banker selection in our flagship service, GlobalBanks Insider. With GlobalBanks Insider, you'll get instant access to our entire archive of banking intelligence reports, access to the GlobalBanks database, home to more than 250 banks from 50+ countries, including detailed bank profiles, client preferences, and a whole lot more. And finally, you'll also get real-time analyst support from our team of experts, ready to answer your most pressing banking questions and to make suggestions on which banks in Barbados and elsewhere will best meet your objectives. To get started, just click the link in the description below to learn more about GlobalBanks Insider. And before signing off, don't forget to hit subscribe so you get alerted every time we share new banking opportunities. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.